Oh, I guess that's me, huh? Okay.
Leave it in.
In today's episode, we'll answer a question about storage struggles and small closets.
And later, you'll meet Laura, the proud owner of a Lustron house, one of the quirkiest pieces of post-war architecture out there.
But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
You're listening to True Tales from Old Houses.
I totally screwed up. We've only done it 400 times.
I love how we're starting this episode with bloopers.
It's like, I don't know why I can't get it right, the order of things, but in today's episode is how it starts, Daniel.
Well, I don't know what's wrong with me either. At least one per season, I look at what we have to say and I look at you and my mind just draws a blank. So anyway, here we are.
It's because we're so pretty. We just get distracted.
Anyway, before we launch into today's episode, I do want to say a special thank you to our season 12 sponsors, the window course from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, Sutherland Wells, Repaint Studios, and Old House Hub from My Old House Fix.
Thank you, all of our friends. We appreciate you.
Oh my gosh. They put up with a lot, don't they? We're high maintenance.
A lot. We're hard, but, we try not to bother them too much. So what you got, announcements-wise?
Oh, no, not announcements.
Oh, no.
Useful information. What are we calling it now?
Salient facts. I have no idea.
It's about the Wood Window Workshop at Silver Lake. Real quickly, the July 11th through 13th workshop is sold out.
Woo-woo.
And the July 18th through 20th only has, at least as of this recording, 3 spots left. I can't vouch for what that will be today when you are hearing it, all of you out there. Right now, 3 spots left. So if you have not snagged yours and you want to go, please do. Silver Lake Institute is just a half day's drive from a couple places in Canada near Toronto. We've also got Hudson Valley, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. All those places are close, within a half day's drive or less. Did I already say that? I think I did that.
Could be.
Could be.
It's a real Rust Belt friendly location.
There you go. We're also about 45 minutes from the Buffalo and Rochester airports. Both are international airports with plenty of flights coming in and out all day. So grab those last 3 spots or less, or fewer, I suppose.
Very, very exciting. Sold out first weekend. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you very much. That was a kind of a surprise. That's what happens with this workshop too. We'll be going along, plugging along, getting at somebody signing up here and there. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're done. And it's just kind of shocking.
And because these will be the 4th and 5th, I think, workshops that you've done at Silver Lake, you have a lot of practice under your belt. It's a well-oiled machine. So
you took my line. I was just going to describe us as a well-oiled machine at this point. So yeah,
you've rubbed up on me. That's such a Stacy phrase. You say that a lot.
It is a Stacy phrase, isn't it?
We're becoming one finally. Okay, sorry.
Do you have any follow-up on your end from anything? I didn't hear much from people, except they were very happy with the linseed oil paint episode. Very informative. Everybody really learned a lot from that. I have heard a lot about that.
In my own household, too, I've been on a one-man campaign to get Brad to paint the porch floor, which I think this is a good application of linseed paint. Why is Michiel not here? But I think that it's a good solution because he has a porch floor. We did seal it with, I think, water locks, which I think we did 1 coat. It's kind of worn off. It has not fared very well. So we're sort of...
Can I call you out, though, about water locks?
Yes.
Because we're talking about the cottage, right? You're talking about the cottage?
Yeah, the lake house.
Yeah, the lake house. All right. So you guys, that canister of water locks was 25 years old. I mean, didn't you find it in a...
Well, Stacy, the thing we forget is that 25 years is 2000. And that can was definitely from 1971. So it was really old.
So I hate to see you call out water locks as not the best solution for this porch when you were basically using something that we do not know chemically what it is at this point.
So in fact, it's not really the best solution. If you were going to use water locks, you would want to use, for an exterior, you'd want to use their marine varnish, which is slightly different. I don't know how. But yeah, totally. It was really old. Who knows? It performed fine. It was just, we only did
for
the
one
one
season.
coat, I don't know. But listen, we were trying to film a show and some things just didn't get done super well. Also, I will say, like, I don't love a unstained porch floor, which I know is shocking maybe coming from me because you reminded me that I had many years ago written on my blog something derogatory about staining like pine to look like mahogany or something. And here I will publicly eat my words and say, if you're using like fur on a porch floor, I do think it looks better stained. I stained my own. There we didn't. And so it was very pretty when it first went in. Now it's become very, very orange. Fur just does that kind of regardless, but especially if you have a oil-based coating on it. So point is, even if we restored it to just how it looked right after we sealed it the first time, I still don't really think it's that great looking. I'm fully in support of paint it.
By the way, the line you mentioned was something along the lines of, if you stain pine with a mahogany stain, it looks like pine dressed up as mahogany for Halloween. I believe that's the way you put it.
Harsh.
That's harsh, but I kind of love
just
it.
Like very unforgiving. Thank God I've softened so much in my old age. I've become so much kinder, more understanding.
I have, just to change topics 100% and bring it to something different, I have a new acquaintance, a new friend that I just met recently. And she and I were at a party together. And she said to me, I listened to your podcast and I loved it. But I have a question for you about your co-host. I was kind of waiting too. I was like, all right, what's this question going to be? Am I going to have to put up my fists and fight this woman?
Is the voice a medical condition or just sort of how it is? No, what is it?
No, the question she asked me, she said, okay, I've been trying to guess what he looks like. Is he bald?
Am I bald?
Yeah, That's what she wondered. And I said, no, he's not. I thought you might think that was very funny.
Wow.
But I guess you're giving bald energy.
Bald energy, bald guy energy.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
I think it's funny. I guess you and I were on social media and people knew us a lot on social media first where they've seen our pictures. But I am curious how people would think of us. I mean, she's probably one of the first people I've ever known that didn't know what we looked like ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining that would change the perception of someone listening.
I mean, I'm just surprised she didn't think I was like a 60-year-old, lady named Roxanne that smokes a lot or something.
Likes to knit in her spare time.
I was thinking more works at the gas station and smokes, but
All right. Well, yeah.
Fascinating.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll add that to my feather in my cap. I don't know. I feel good about it.
I think you should.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. All right. Well, we do need to take a quick break, but listener Q&A is up next.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by The Window Course. The Window Course, created by our friend Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog, is a step-by-step do-it-yourself program that will teach you everything you need to know to successfully restore the wood windows at your house. It is self-paced, so you can go as fast or as slow as you need, and there are several price points to fit your needs and budget.
Spring is here, and summer is right around the corner. Now is the perfect time to restore windows. And the Window Course has all of the information you need all in one place.
Scott is offering his students a special deal. So if you sign up for the Lifetime Access Package or the Training Package, you'll also get a free infrared paint remover.
Even better, the Window Course is offered with a money-back guarantee, and Scott is giving True Tales from Old Houses listeners a special discount. For 10% off, visit thewindowcourse.com and use the coupon code TrueTales.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island with the highest quality sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, which is native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
Polyurethane, that's just plastic. And unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood so it flexes and it contracts as the conditions change. And that makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
Stacy and I have both used Sutherland Wells products throughout our houses, but whatever you are working on, Sutherland Wells has an entire product line available for siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, really, you name it.
To learn more about the complete product line, visit Sutherland Wells, that's WELLES, SutherlandWells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, Use our coupon code TrueTales. We're back.
We're back.
Today's question comes from Allison, and she asks, can we talk about closets? The ones in my house are laughably tiny. Do you have any good storage tips? I think this is a great question because I think a lot of people are surprised by the lack of storage when they get their first new old house. After you've lived there a while, or if you've had more than one old house, you're kind of used to the situation, but it can be a rude awakening the first time around. Do you want to start?
No.
Okay. I will start.
Dive in.
Okay.
I have some big feelings.
Okay.
Dive right in.
I guess I should say most of us may know this already, but a lot of old houses didn't have big closets for the main reason that people just didn't have a whole lot of stuff the way we have now. Also, instead of closets, there were pieces of furniture like armoires and dressers and things like that were used instead. I don't have the history of the closet for you. I did not prepare that for this podcast. But there are certain types of houses like Foursquares and Craftsman's that really do have tiny little closets because they were sort of more utilitarian houses. And then when you had Victorian era houses, Queen Anne's and such, those were the houses that, armoires and dressers and things were very common. So it just kind of depends on when the house was built and also who it was built for at the time. So there's a little bit of history that nobody asked for. I have a mixed bag here at my house. I have some closets that are really big, like surprisingly, shockingly large. And then I have some that are so small that you can't even fit a hanger in the right way. It has to fit on the diagonal because the closet's not deep enough to hold a regular hanger. My only thought for this was that, or the only reason I can come up with in this particular house is that it was a summer house. So I imagine they were bringing a lot of things with them, luggage and bigger items that they intended to stay here for long periods of time. And so that's what the big closets perhaps were for. And then the small closets were for, I don't know, people who were supposedly helping them through the summer, or just maybe the small amount of items that somebody would keep in their bedroom overnight. I have solved a lot of this by actually converting those small closets to shelving units instead of closets. A lot of the closets they're not deep, they're very shallow, but they might have a recessed area that goes pretty far down on the right side of the closet or on the left.
So like when you open the door, there's kind of that no man's land.
Yes.
To the right or the left of the door.
Yeah, it'd be useful for a pair of skis or something tall. But what I often do is convert that to shelving, or in some cases, I've taken the rod and actually shortened it and turned it 90 degrees and used that recessed area to hold the clothing rod and hang the clothes there, and then use the shallow part and turn it into shelves. Hopefully that makes sense on a podcast, because I know that's a little confusing to hear about.
It makes sense. So rather than use the long wall right in front of you, use the two short walls on the side to do your deeper storage. And then maybe you still have space in the middle for a shallow or something, or hooks or something. Okay, got it.
Yeah. For shelves or something. And maybe the shelves are low, or I've put shelves down low and put shoes in them, so you could stack the shoes high instead of in a big pile there at the bottom. Or like you called it, in no man's land, where everything gets lost back there in the dark recesses of the closet. What about you?
So I think all of those points are good. I think just to circle back on maybe the first one, like embracing the way that these houses were designed to be lived in, I think is a pretty good first strategy. So armoires still work pretty well. And they're actually generally, at least in my area, like super affordable. It's very hard to sell like big old wood furniture in general. So you can find this stuff for a couple $100. So I think that's like thing number one, is like, don't be afraid of an armoire or a dresser. Also, I think it's generally good advice with like clothing, like just fold whatever can practically be folded so your closets don't have to do as much work. I definitely think that shelving and like readily available storage solutions are sort of undervalued in the old home world, where we want everything to look like it's been built in for 100 years and whatever. It's a closet. do what works. So I'm a huge fan of a track shelving system. You can buy from like any big box, you can buy all these things as components, or you can buy like a kit that I used these at the cottage when I just needed to put something in those closets to make them function. But I was like, I've millworked this house to death. I don't need to do it in the closet. So I got real simple closet systems that are made for a closet between 5 and 7 feet wide and whatever. And you can just sort of arrange them as you want.
And we've talked about that before because I like track shelving too. I think that's a great solution. Yeah.
I love it. And it's nice too, because this is also a very common issue with apartments. And the nice thing with those kinds of systems is they disassemble in a few minutes and you take all the parts with you and you can put it up in whatever arrangement you want at your next place. And, so I certainly like that. And then there's also for like the shallow closet issue, if you are trying to hang, there are like interesting little contraptions and things you can find online of like rods that kind of pull out or hangers that pivot so they can be turned diagonally or sort of flat against the wall to stack your clothes that way. Instead, I'm using my hands. You guys can't see that. I'm sorry. This is hard to explain.
I know. I found myself doing that when I was explaining my process too. Yes. I have these little things. They're called, I think, ruby space triangles that I use sometimes in one of the closets I have where they actually just slip over the hanger that hangs on the rod. And then the next hanger can hang on the little ruby space triangle. And you can kind of stack them that way, but they stay thinner than like those metal rods that you're supposed to, or those metal racks that you're supposed to hang pants on, and they get real thick. Like you have 5 or 6 different places for pants to hang on them, but then it gets to this big, thick wad of pants that gets in the way of other things.
Yes.
Going back to shelving, I actually just bought some from, not recently, but I bought some bookcases that fit right under usually these closets have one shelf and that shelf is high. And then if you stack things on it, it's even higher.
Right. Well, because the ceiling's like 8 feet, say, and then the shelf is always at like 6 feet. So then you just have this 2-foot space that's really hard to access between the top of that shelf and the ceiling. But most of that is behind a wall over the door. Anyway, talk to me more about, I hate that challenge.
Yeah, I do too. So I've reserved that space for simply things that I really don't need to get to very much at all. And then I got these really narrow, they're not narrow bookshelves. I'm sorry. I got a couple of bookshelves that fit just right under that shelf. And then they kind of go back into that recessed area, but I can still add stuff to that shelf and then slide it back into that recessed area. I use that in my office a lot because I have several things that are in boxes, recording equipment that I always keep in boxes and shipping supplies and all those things. They just go right into the closet on that shelf and it keeps everything very neat. And the shelf holds a ton of stuff. My son used the same bookshelves in his closet and actually put books on them. He found he didn't really have any hanging clothes so much. Who has hanging clothes anymore? Anyway, he found he didn't have any hanging clothes much. He had a chest of drawers to put his folded clothes in. So he actually filled his entire closet and turned it into a bookshelf. So there's so many ways that you can modify that space. Even if you find it's not a functioning clothing closet for you, you can use it for so many other things.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, lastly, I think one of my biggest pet peeve in old house renovations is when you can see that a closet was very clearly added to a room. I would say like in old houses, it is
the bump out.
Yes. So in old houses, it is so rare to see a closet that looks like it's just been sort of bumped into a room. Usually it's like designed so it's under the staircase or it's a back-to-back situation. So there's a large cavity between 2 rooms and they each get a closet, that kind of thing. A lot of times when people renovate old houses, they will just frame in a closet because a bedroom must have a closet. By the way, by code, that is generally not true. So I think often that actually produces a less efficient result than if you just got a piece of furniture, especially if that piece of furniture is something like a PAX wardrobe from IKEA that has, lots of shelves and rods and drawers and all these ways you can arrange it. It gives you way more flexibility than a closet with a short little door and a high little ceiling. And, so I would just say, do everything you can to avoid adding an awkward closet if you don't 100% have to. And, it's very rare that you have to.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because you just really take one problem and give yourself a different one if you build in a bump out closet.
Yeah. Like, it's bigger than it needs to be simply by nature of the framing depth. Like, you're losing inches. It limits how you can arrange a room. Usually it messes up, the symmetry of where a window is. Like, it just is so rarely goes well. And it's so not necessary is the point.
Yeah. All right. All good points.
And that's how I feel.
Yeah. If anyone has solutions that we did not mention, and I'm sure there are plenty, some that are just right in front of our noses and we've missed them, please do let us know how you have solved this problem in your old house. We would love to hear from you. You can just reach out through the contact form. And if anyone else has a question for us to answer in an upcoming episode, then shoot us your question through the contact form or leave us a voicemail. Daniel, would you like to explain how our friends can leave us a voicemail?
If you go to truetalesfromoldhouses.com, you can click on the microphone icon in the bottom right corner and follow a series of prompts, and it will get a voicemail over to us.
We have not had a voicemail this season, and
it's been a while.
We're feeling sad. So we promise if you leave us a voicemail, we won't make a big deal about it. We're going to love it, but we're not going to make a big deal about it.
Correct. And if you have like a really cool closet solution, please send us pictures. We would love
that's
to
a great
see them.
idea.
I would genuinely love to see that.
Yeah, me too.
Well, thanks so much, Allison. And Stacy, I think we need a break.
You're right, Daniel. It's time for another quick break. True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Repaint Studios. Daniel, in the past, how did you store your paint tray when you were mid-project?
I'll be honest, I would store cheap plastic paint liners in the trash.
Well, similar issue here, except I used a garbage bag and that was a sticky mess. But now I use the repaint tray.
I have also made the conversion. Let's spread the word.
Billy, the inventor, knew that this was a problem for so many, so she created the solution. And now her woman-owned business is disrupting the paint industry. The repaint tray solves that mid-project paint storage problem. It has a reusable silicone liner, an airtight lid, and it keeps your paint fresh for weeks.
Weeks, and more weeks.
It's like Tupperware, but for your paint tray.
Absolutely. The tray itself, I would like to note, is a very heavy-duty metal, so it doesn't slide around or wobble when you're using it. Plus, when you're done painting, you just let the paint dry in the silicone liner, and then you can peel it right out like the next day, and man, does it feel good.
The tray, silicone liner, and lid are built to last, which is better for you and the planet. It's the last paint tray you'll ever need, so save those garbage bags for the trash can.
Snag one for yourself at repaintstudios.com. And for 10% off your order, use the coupon code TrueTales10.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Old House Hub, brought to you by My Old House Fix. Next question, Daniel. Have you ever spent hours scrolling Facebook groups, Reddit threads, obscure websites, random YouTube videos, trying to find answers about your old house problem?
I think you know the answer, but in case you're not sure, I absolutely have. Not to mention those deep dives where you come out 3 hours later, you know everything about a certain topic that is totally unrelated to your project and haven't meaningfully made any progress. Does that sound like a thing?
That sounds like a thing. And that's where we are excited to tell everyone about the Old House Hub from My Old House Fix.
The Old House Hub is like your headquarters for all things old house. It's an exclusive online community where you can gather resources, browse archives by topic, and connect with fellow enthusiasts and get expert advice too. It's a place where you can share your passions without getting lost in endless social media feeds.
There's no creepy AI algorithm suggesting totally unrelated content. It's just good, meaningful conversations with people who get it. So no more scrolling, no more headaches, just connection and answers.
It's like that good old school internet, but for old house lovers. And the best part is that right now, True Tales from Old Houses listeners can get a 1-year membership to the Old House Hub for free with the coupon code TrueTales.
But that great deal is only available during this season of the podcast. So when season 12 ends, the deal ends.
So get on it. Visit oldhousehub.com to join the Old House Hub community for free and finally have a go-to place for your old house questions, projects, and inspiration.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hello and welcome. So to set the stage for today's guest, there's a little bit of background we just want to share about Lustron homes. So we talked about this a little bit on the bonus episode and then on the mini episode from July 3rd and July 11th, 2023, respectively. So go back and listen if you want. But after World War II, America had this serious housing problem. Just too many people, all these returning GIs, not enough houses. So with all of this new technology and manufacturing innovations that were developed during the war, there were all these kind of modern design solutions that sought to address this crisis in low cost, easily constructed, replicable ways that could just be done throughout the entire country. And so one of those things that came up in this time that we thought was really interesting were these Lustron homes, which were made entirely of steel. So everything from the walls to the roof to the kitchen cabinets, they were built to last, but not very many of them were built. So when we talked about this, we heard from a lot of people about it, like shockingly, and we were excited. And then we have spent the last almost 2 years now hoping to talk to somebody who actually lives in one of these houses. And we did. Well, Stacy did. I missed it.
Yes, clearly Lustron homes were built to last. And today's guest, I am so excited to share this interview with you. She is lucky enough to live in one.
Hi, my name is Laura, and I have been living in a Lustron house for about 4 years now.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, I say we. Daniel could not be here today. He's going to be very, very upset about this, but I'm going to use the royal we anyway. We've been so excited to have you on the show and to talk to somebody who is legitimately living in a Lustron house, because it has been this weird thing that just keeps coming up every season since we started. We got interested in the homes. We actually just barely touched on the topic in one episode, and then people would send us stories or pictures, and it keeps coming back around. And so thank you. You're going to clear up some mysteries for us, I have a feeling.
Yes, these houses do tend to mystify people. They always have a lot of questions. A lot of them are really similar questions. So hopefully I have answers to yours. I was listening to your episode about prefab houses, the Levitt towns and whatnot. And I think I have a very similar interest in these kinds of structures and like what they are like to live in and what they mean culturally in this country.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about that. That's actually kind of part two of the first question I was going to ask you was, how did you end up owning this house? And then, of course, was it love at first sight? So why don't you start there?
Yeah, the way I ended up owning this house, it was kind of synchronicity. I was looking to just rent a home in my town, and my town has kind of an interesting housing situation in which oftentimes, if you can afford to buy a house, it's much cheaper than renting. And so I was looking for apartments. I couldn't find anything that really fit my needs at my price point. And a friend of mine sent me a link to this house in their neighborhood. They were like, this is weird. You would love it. And I clicked on the link and immediately I knew what it was. I already knew what Lustrons were. I had actually just visited the Henry Ford Museum up in Detroit and seen the Demaxian house. So I already had like futuristic mid-century homes on the mind. And I decided to just go look at it, not necessarily with the intention of buying it, but I wanted to see what it was like in these kinds of homes. I went through the process. I got pre-qualified and everything, and I stepped in the house and it was love at first sight.
Really?
I walked through and I thought to myself, I deserve this home more than anyone else who's going to walk in these doors. It was just I'd never even considered buying a home. It was a completely new thought process to me. And I didn't know how I would feel when I walked in, but I saw the walls and the ceiling and all the built-ins and thought, I will regret not at least making an offer on this house.
Sure.
So I made an offer. It was accepted the next morning. And 2 weeks later, I was moving in.
That is incredible. Okay. So we have talked about it a lot over the seasons, over the last couple of seasons, but for people who may just be joining right now and may not be familiar with a Lustron, can you describe what makes it so unique, structurally, stylistically, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Well, what makes a Lustron unique is, first off, it's made entirely out of metal. It's made out of enameled steel, which makes it more akin to an appliance like a stove or an old car than most home construction materials. And it's metal inside and out. From the roof, the exterior walls, the interior walls, the ceiling, everything is metal. And It was made on an assembly line. It was intended to be a quick production prefab house to house returning GIs after World War II. I believe the designer originally wanted to make gas stations, and the government wouldn't fund that, but they would fund houses. So he tweaked some of the dimensions and made a home instead. They weren't tremendously popular, and they didn't churn off the assembly line as quickly as they had hoped. And he ended up, I think, losing money and not being able to repay the loan. So they were only made for about a year and a half out of a factory in Columbus, Ohio.
Wow. Am I right that there's only maybe a couple thousand or a few thousand of them in total?
Yeah, the numbers vary, but they believe that they only made about 2,500 of them, and about 1,000, maybe a little bit more of them are still standing and used as homes today.
Okay. So you mentioned you walked into your house and you thought it was love at first sight. What did you like? What drew you to the Lustron?
It was so weird.
Is that the answer?
Yeah,
it was so weird.
It was so weird. I should say, when I considered owning a home, I always wanted the one that would be unique. And the city I live in has a lot of very unique architecture, but most of it is large Victorians, Italianate, like mid to late 1800s style homes. And then the rest are post-World War II branches. And I didn't want 5,000 square feet, but I also didn't want, in my mind, I didn't want a cookie cutter home, which is strange because I literally bought an assembly line cookie cutter home.
But there's only 1,000 of them. So yes.
Yes. And it feels like a 1940s or 50s version, or a 1940s or 50s vision of a futuristic home. It's like Cold War space age. You can picture people having dinner parties that are mostly different types of Jell-O and, and milling about and looking at the sliding doors and sort of imagining what Americans thought the future might look like at that point in time.
Oh, that's super fascinating. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to hear it described that way. Interesting. Do you know the particular history behind your house?
Yeah. Well, so I can at least tell you a little bit of history around the style of my house. My house is a style called the Newport, and cigarette brand, very on brand for the 40s and 50s. Right. But it's called the Newport, and it was the most popular style because it was sort of the middle version. There was a smaller version with smaller bedrooms, and I believe there was a slightly larger version, but this was the one that was most mass produced. This is the classic husband, wife, 2 kids, white picket fence size house. This one was built in 1949, like basically all others. And it is in a part of my city that is just adjacent to downtown, in an area that you might call, at one point in time, it might have been considered a bedroom community, but now it is part of the city proper. So it fits in almost seamlessly with the classic like suburban style ranch house, except once you look a little bit closer, you start to realize how strange it is.
Whenever I see Lustron houses, they always look quilted to me, almost like quilted metals. Are they flat pieces of metal fit together, or do they have some sort of dimension? Because to me, it almost looks like they're quilted.
The way that they were pressed, the outside locks together and is very flat. It's almost seamless, except for a very thin, like sort of PVC seal in between that keeps it weather tight. And the inside, they pressed it to look like wood, basically, to look like there are planks that run from the ceiling to the floor. And those have basically, you can't see the seams, but they're in there somewhere. The folks who owned this house before me painted it in these. At first, I thought the colors were a bit much, and then I realized that they warm it up. You don't necessarily, living in a metal house, people always ask me, does it feel cold?
I hadn't gotten there yet, but I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, and I can go into more detail then. But they warmed it up with these colors, really bright accents. And at first, I thought it might be difficult to decorate around that. And then I realized that it just gave me license to be as eclectic as I wanted to. Bright blue trim goes with everything if you put enough on the wall.
Yeah, and you sent some photos which were so fun to look at how the house was when you bought it, and then also what you've done with it in the meantime. And do you mind if I share those in a blog post or anything? That'd be really fun to show everybody, because, we see them sometimes in a realtor's listing or in a I don't know, magazine article, but it's just not the same as knowing how someone lives in one of these houses.
Yeah. At first, I thought to myself, if you don't do something with it, it can appear cold and echoey. And I never really thought of myself as much of a maximalist in terms of decoration. I was a maximalist. I was just kind of a lazy maximalist. And this house makes it so easy to decorate. With a metal house, you use magnets.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me, all the magnets.
And you can move things wherever you feel like putting them.
Sure. Yeah. That would actually afford a lot of flexibility because you get tired of the room and you're like, well, I'll just move all the magnets in a different place.
Exactly.
Wow. That's neat. So, you talked about cold and it actually feels pretty warm, but we've touched on this in previous episodes almost as a joke about like the heating system, which is unusual. And you actually sent a picture of it, which I loved because I am a very practical person. So I'm all over the maintenance and care of the Lustron home.
Yeah.
How does the heater work and does it work? Because we've had some questions about that.
Yes.
And when I say we, I should say Daniel and I have had some questions about that.
That is one thing that if anybody knows anything about a Lustron home, when they find out I have one, that's one of the first questions they ask. And the answer is the heater works by forcing air through about a 4-inch plenum or an empty space between the ceiling and the attic. And the heat is supposed to radiate downward from the ceiling. I don't know if the laws of thermodynamics are different in Sweden, but the designer was Swedish, but it doesn't work great. And so some of the previous owners put insulation in the attic, which helps keep the heat loss from above down. But driving the heat down to the part of the house where human beings live, which is not right near the ceiling, can be a challenge. I use a system of fans that I point at the ceiling to get the heat down, and I just accept that this is a slippers and socks house.
Right.
And area rugs. You got to cover the floor or your feet are going to be cold. It doesn't work the best, but it has helped me. I've turned into my dad. I just say, put on a sweater if you're cold.
We've all turned into our dads. Who are we kidding? Yeah, old house life is not always the warmest in the winter. So even in the best of times. So I think most of our listeners can understand how that goes. But it occurred to me, so the floor is metal too, I guess, or would be underneath whatever flooring option you have.
What I believe is that I'm not actually sure if the floor is metal. I think the floor is concrete slab with...
Oh, that makes sense.
My understanding is that there's some type of insulation down in there. I hope it's not asbestos tile. It very well could be. Regardless, it has been covered up by vinyl composite, which makes cleaning very, very easy. I suppose if I ever want to change the flooring, I will find out what's under that vinyl composite and deal with that when it comes to it.
Well, until then, we'll just pretend it's not asbestos.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Doesn't exist. I'm on the same page with it.
I won't drill any holes. It'll be okay.
Right. Well, I mean, let's talk about maintenance a little bit, because when you have everything enclosed in metal walls, what happens if you need something like new wiring or you need the plumbing fixed? I mean, how does that work?
That happened to me about 1 year ago. I came home and there was water on the floor, which is a terrible feeling as a homeowner. I found the source of the leak, and it was a pipe that was inside one of the walls running from the utility area, which is right where the furnace is, through to a wall that was kind of adjacent to the living room. Luckily for me, I say luckily because it is a metal house. You can't just cut a hole and, fix it with plaster it over, throw up some extra drywall, paint over it, and it's done. You want to avoid poking unnecessary holes in this house as much as possible, because that's where you get rust, and that's when the structural integrity of the house sort of starts to fail. I had to, first off, I should say there are very helpful Facebook groups, Reddit groups, forums of people who live in these houses because they know they're quirky, and the average contractor would walk in here and go, I don't even know how to start approaching, like how to dismantle this house, because it has to be dismantled in order to make adjustments.
Interesting.
And so I say luckily because the exact place where the pipe happened to burst was behind the coat closet. So I could go in with a screwdriver and remove piece by piece the rack, the shelving, then I believe it was the ceiling and then the walls of the coat closet, and take them out, set them aside, exposing the pipe for the plumber to come and fix it. and then just reverse to reassemble. I had to actually remove my coat closet in order to get to the pipe. I don't know what I would have done if it had been in a less easily accessible area. The way that the plumbing is set up, it's all kind of in that part of the house, luckily. So I think that's intentional. They also do give you strange little access points where there's a panel that will have a handle and you can pop that handle out to get to the circuit breaker or the water shutoff and things like that.
Which makes total sense. I mean, when you think about somebody who would design it, they would have to know.
It's not going to work forever. Yeah.
Right. That's great. So it does make sense that wherever it was leaking would just be right there near a place that you could disassemble. So, wow. I mean, I guess you just, label parts, or it's all pretty clear when you take it apart?
I labeled parts. I did not want to get stuck trying to...
Smart.
It's like, I think in the very previous episodes, it's described as like the IKEA of homes.
Yeah.
Which it very much is. And you want to make sure you label and bag all your parts and you put numbers on it, or else you don't trust your memory.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. So rust, look at me, the practical person. Do you deal with that sometimes? And if so, what do you do to repair it?
Yeah. Rust is basically the issue for this house. It doesn't need to be painted. The exterior, it ideally never needs to be painted. And in fact, probably shouldn't be, because that will just end up trapping things between the paint and the enamel. You don't necessarily want that, especially outside. Rust, I spot treat it. The small spots, you can use like different types of epoxy and sealant and things like that. The roof will eventually need to probably be sanded down and painted with, can't remember the exact type of paint right now, but it's sort of the rubberized thick paint that can kind of bend and form and forms a good seal. A lot of times, it's the paint that they'll use on top of like industrial buildings, especially if there's a flat roof. That will have to happen at some point. But right now the roof is 75 years old and still working. The insurance companies had no idea what to do with a 75-year-old roof when I bought this house.
I bet. I wonder what an insurance agent would think about it. I mean, you clearly have one, so yeah, I should probably talk to one.
It was a challenge, though.
I bet. It seems like it would be a slam dunk for them because there's really nothing flammable. So I'm surprised that they were, put up a fuss about it.
It was the age of the materials. Just simply a 75-year-old roof doesn't really compute into most of the equations that they use to determine level of coverage. I did get a discount because the house is fire resistant, though.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah. And you don't live in a super fire prone part of the country as well either. Yeah. Interesting. So the outside color, if you make a repair out there, you said you don't really want to paint it. Is the epoxy just colored? Do you put pigments or something in the epoxy or in the...
I'm lucky in that most of the street facing side of the house is in remarkably good condition. There's only maybe a little bit of rust down towards the bottom of it. And then I just use a clear coat. I haven't tried to color match yet. I suppose I could put a little more effort into it and get there one day, but I basically just wanted to. I am also very grateful that I have huge pollinator gardens out front of my house and surrounding it. So any discoloration from my lack of effort gets hidden very early on in the season. And so you can't even see it.
It sounds like you're handling it just right. And it sounds perfect with the plants covering up that. I just was real curious, if people were out there with their spray paint cans, with spray painting.
They do. Actually, those Facebook groups that I mentioned have basically, if you ask, there's one guy in particular who will tell you the Sherwin-Williams color code or the this and that color code for all the different types of Lustrons. I think they only came out in 4 different colors, so it's pretty easy. There was a yellow, a tan, a grayish, and then this really cool turquoise blue color that they came out in. So you just need to drop a question and you'll find out. They'll get you a color match instantly.
It's nice to have that support.
Yes.
So built-ins, original features and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about those. What are the original features of the Newport, for instance?
So the original features of the Newport, they have a built-in sort of china cabinet and pots and pans storage. The kitchen is, I would say, galley style with built-ins lining basically the entire thing on both sides at eye level up to the ceiling, which is really great. I didn't need a single additional shelf for any of my kitchen goods. There are built-ins in the living room, basically a small bookshelf area. And then all of the closets, the linen closet and closets in both bedrooms are built-ins with sliding doors. The only issue with that is that the mechanics of the sliding doors, the runners and sure there's a word for it, but the rollers will start to malfunction with time, and you end up having to like throw your weight into it as to get to your coats. A few of them
Put your back into it.
Yes, exactly. A few of them I've taken off and just replaced with curtains and runners. It's very easy and doesn't look out of place. It's just, it's a very cheap fix.
And you get a little cash back from the scrap metal, right?
That is a Lustron industry, is letting people know when they're being dismantled, and people will drive to get scrap, because unless you have a friend who's a metal fabricator, it's going to be challenging to get an exact replacement part unless you scavenge it from the skeleton of a different one that's like being taken down for some reason.
Yeah, right. Are there other Lustron homes in your town?
Yes, there are about 25 actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And a handful of them in my neighborhood, which is pretty cool. Some of them have been covered up with either vinyl siding on the outside to make them look more like a typical stick-built home. Some of them have been modified, but there are a few well-kept, at least on the outside, original-looking Lustrons in the area.
I was just looking up, we talked about this, I think, a couple episodes ago, Daniel and I did, about somebody sent me a link. I believe, you can find Lustron homes. There's a link you can go to and then type in state by state or whatever. It'll tell you where the Lustron homes are. And Erie, Pennsylvania, which is probably about 2.5 hours from me, has a pretty big concentration of Lustrons. And I was saying, wow, I should drive by and, have an old house gathering and we could all go drive by these Lustrons.
There is a small but very enthusiastic appreciation society for these homes. I think they draw people with almost a collector's mindset, where maybe the functionality isn't as important as the aesthetic or the just love of something strange. And so you get these little pockets in places you wouldn't expect. They were produced in Ohio, so you get a decent number in Ohio. St. Louis has a good concentration of them. But yeah, I believe they're all listed on Wikipedia too. They have just like a straight up list. And there are quite a few of them, or quite a few states that still have them. And you'll notice that they're grouped in areas, probably because that's where they made their deliveries to before they went out of business.
Right. And that makes sense. If you're taking one, you might as well.
Yeah. Throw a few more on the flatbed.
Yeah, exactly. So within this preservation community, do you get gatherings, or is it all online, or how do you keep in touch?
It is mostly online. I think just because there's not that many and they are kind of scattered, the logistics of it are quite literally based off of where everyone lives. So it would be challenging to get people together. I do think that there are regional meetups, and I've even watched, at least online, some webinars that have been put on at different historical societies or universities even talking about the Lustron. So there's this fascination with the house that really outlived the house by the production of the house by quite some time. So it is a strong online community. I've actually never met anyone else who's lived in one, but yeah, they love to talk about them.
Sure. I think we all do. Yeah. So I guess when people find out that you live in a Lustron home, what do they think? What's their first? Well, you mentioned the heat, but are they immediately like, what are you talking about? Or do they have concerns?
Yeah. I'll say I live in a metal house and they will say like a shipping container. And I'm like, well, no, but I guess sort of. It's the closest. People think of these, tiny homes. And I'm like, this isn't a tiny home. This is a 1,200 square foot ranch style house, 2-bedroom, typical size home, just made out of metal. And their question is, everything? I'm like, yes, everything. Let's get that out of the way. They're like, how do you hang things? Magnets. You buy a lot of magnets, you find out which ones are strong and which ones aren't strong enough, and you go from there. I have hanging lamps on my ceiling suspended by magnets.
So neat. Yeah. Wow.
It makes storage easy. Fruits and vegetables in a bag, get a hook magnet, throw it on the bottom of your, beneath your cabinets. And now it's just there. It can get things out of the way. Then they ask, sometimes if they don't have a reference point for it, I'll point them to, people are going to know the answer to this one. It's one of the Fallout video games, maybe Fallout 2 or 4, one of those. I'm not a video game person, but it starts in a neighborhood. It takes place in a sort of dystopian sci-fi future, but it starts in a neighborhood that is based off of Lustrons. It starts in a Lustron house. The design is based off of it. Basically, they chose it as what would the suburb of the future look like. And so you start by running through a neighborhood full of Lustron homes. And usually that will like perk people's ears up. They're like, oh, I've played that before. You live in one of the Fallout homes? I'm like, yes, I live in one of the Fallout homes. Oh, and the next question is, do you cell service? They always ask if cell phones, Wi-Fi, anything like that is impacted by it. And so far, no. That was a concern though when I first moved in. I'm like, will my Wi-Fi work in a different room? I've never had to think about that before, but modern technology does pretty well.
In old houses, a lot with plaster walls, that's a big deal. Like if you have a 2-story house with plaster walls. So I think that's a common thing. We're always trying to figure out how to get our internet where we want it. So what advice would you give to someone, I guess, who's thinking about buying or restoring one of these prefabricated homes?
This house is an exercise in acceptance. And what I mean by that is that you can't really modify it. And I think to architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, who would create these homes that were you move into them, especially a lot of his later homes, the benches are where they are. The pieces are built into the house and you are supposed to fill that space then. This house really can't and shouldn't be modified in any significant way. It's designed in a certain way so that the pieces all fit together. And once you start cutting into the metal, you're going to start changing the structure of the home in a way that it was not meant to experience. So you have to just accept that this is your house. Then you make it yours. And which was fine because I had never really had a house before and I didn't have all that much stuff. So I kind of moved in and spent a few months/years figuring out where things fit best. And it's almost like if you wear a uniform to work and you don't have to think about what you're going to get dressed in the morning. At first you feel like it's restrictive, but then it eventually becomes a little bit liberating because then that's a part of your brain. You just don't have to think about that. You can just do that. When I moved into this house, initially I was like, oh, well, I can't move where certain things are, or I couldn't build renovating the bathroom would be difficult. And then I realized, well, it's great. So I don't even have to think about that. The house is the house. And I bought it because I liked the house, not because I wanted to change the house. So I just got really into decorating it. Every wall in my house is covered almost floor to ceiling with art, posters, souvenirs, memorabilia, things that I've collected over the years. And I don't need to worry about a house that I can't change because it allows me to display everything about me.
I actually really love that. That's a really good way to look at it. I think so many people are looking, like you said, to change something about the house they're living in. And so, yeah, you could just really cultivate and curate the things that are important to you in your life. And those will change. So maybe, talk about the bathroom. Maybe you just need to get a different color towel. You know,
exactly.
That's a lot easier than remodeling a whole bathroom.
So much easier. Yeah. And that's what it is you can change the decor. You really can't change the house.
Right. Well, this has been so great. Believe it or not, we've been flying through our time together. It always goes by so quickly. Is there anything else you would want to tell people about your home or to help them understand?
One of the things that I love about Lustrons and that I think that we could translate into a modern approach to housing. I would consider myself to be an urbanist. I like the idea of having these dense, walkable neighborhoods where you know your neighbors and you can, if there aren't these, I love a lawn, but they do keep us further apart from our neighbors. And a lot of these homes, the way that they are built today based on either a person's desire or the way that a neighborhood might be zoned, are built to have large structures with these big front lawns. I love the idea of taking something that is ostensibly suburban, a ranch style house, and looking at it as a solution to housing. It's relatively small. It's easy to maintain. You can build it quickly. And it doesn't have a huge footprint. You can put them near each other. You can let everyone have their own four walls, which people do tend to love in this country, but have it be in a denser more community-oriented neighborhood. I would love to see like a cottage court full of Lustrons. Like that would be fun with a shared community space in the middle. And I think people think that they need a lot more space than they actually need is the thing that I've found. Even these 1,200 square feet, sometimes I could do with 900. I think it allows me to realize that we can live closer together, and having a little bit less does make the maintenance much easier and frees you up for more social experiences. Who has time for a community garden if you are painting your house again? Yeah. And I know that some people love that painting the house again part, but this is a house. It was built to be a house that you don't have to think about as often. And that has been a part of it that I really do love. When things go wrong, it's difficult, but they don't often go wrong.
Right, right. Yeah. It seems like it's really lived up to the hype of being a forever house.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again so much, Laura. Gosh, I wish Daniel were here to ask you all his questions. Hopefully I hit them all. Hopefully I hit the highlights because, yeah, it's been fantastic. But appreciate you being on the show and indulging our curiosity about the Lustron home.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. Thank you to Allison for your great question and to our guest, Laura. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, The Window Course, Sutherland Wells, Repaint Studios, and Old House Hub.
To continue the conversation, please follow us on Facebook or Instagram. You can follow myself at Daniel Cantor or Stacy at Blake Hill House.
Send us messages and voicemails because we love both.
If you like today's episode, please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. It's free and helps more old house lovers find us.
We'll have a fresh new mini-sode for you next week. Until next time.
See you then.